All right, so I want us to do something real quick before we continue. If you could indulge me and stand up for 1 second. And what I want us to do is I want us to give the SMA a really big hand. This is an amazing conference. So if you could just put our hands together and thank them for what they do. And you may be seated. I kind of just want you to wake up, but and I feel like you can sit. I feel like a kid in a candy store because it's not very often that you would have conferences on the business side of medicine. So we're actually fortunate to be in this room. So my name is Nneka Unachukwu. Everybody, including my sister, calls me Dr. Una. So if you can't say that, that's fine. I'm a pediatrician. We had a 2-mile walk at a park by our practice, and those are my patients and their parents, so I get to have fun for a living. That's what I really do. And I've been the CEO of Ivy League Pediatrics for the last 9 years. When I got out of residency, I heard a saying, hang a shingle and they would come. I hung a shingle and they didn't come. So I had to go through the school of hard knocks and figure out how to work entrepreneurship, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I have no relevant financial relationships to disclose, and today this is my objective, to help us recognize the need for physicians to embrace entrepreneurship in order to improve patient outcomes and to implement the business skills required to build a thriving practice. So I'm gonna preface this because you may say, I don't own a practice, I don't ever want to own a practice, that's not my thing. But what we're really talking about here is entrepreneurship and not necessarily owning a practice. So I will give an example with a friend of mine. She is an employed pediatrician, but she's an entrepreneur at heart. So even though she's employed, she started a YouTube channel for her practice. She manages their social media. She goes and she does speaking gigs on parenting and mommy guilt and all of that. And because of that, there are a whole lot of patients who come into the practice because of her. So even though she doesn't own the practice, it's easy for her to get raises. It's easy for her to negotiate more time off. When a partnership track conversation comes up, she would be offered because she's an asset to the practice. So whether you are working a job or whether you have non-clinical interests or not, this is for everybody. When I was in residency and on my way out, medicine was very different. So this was 2008. And at that time, we didn't have a lot of independent practices owned by nurse practitioners. Telemedicine wasn't a big thing. Retail clinics were not a thing. Like, I never knew CVS would be my competition. I just never thought about it. So the landscape has changed a lot, and we need to change alongside with it. It used to be there's one big pie. It's either the hospital or a private practice, but now it's so many other players in it that we have to compete. We just have to. So if you don't want to own a traditional practice, that's okay. You can be an entrepreneur, which means you work a job, but you have the mindset of an entrepreneur, right? You can do speaking. You can have a cash pay practice that was referred to earlier. You could be a media consultant. And these are not money grabbing things. As a pediatrician, one of the things we have to deal with is people not wanting to get vaccines. And a lot of practices will exclude people who don't want to get vaccines. I had a really hard time doing that because I feel as physicians, we were not out there in the media. We were not showing up on social media. We were not vlogging and blogging about the importance of vaccines, but the anti-vaxxers were. And at the end of the day, the person who controls the media wins. And we just weren't there. And there's so many other things. I can't even put all of them on a slide. So we'll talk about the elephant in the room. And the question is medicine a business? Sometimes it's offensive, like medicine is not a business. Medicine is about patient care. Medicine is about taking care of patients. And the truth of the matter is medicine is all about patient care. At the core, that's what it's about. However, the vehicle that we use to be able to give great medical care is business, right? If you're here and you own a practice, you offer great medical care, but you still have to make payroll. You still have to pay the mortgage of your practice. You still have to figure out how to get patients in. You still have to compete if an urgent care and a retail clinic open right next door to you. So part of running good business systems is still great patient care. So think about it like if you took your car to a gas station. It's all about gas. That's what you want. But it doesn't change the fact that they have to make pumps available. They have to make available people who will pump the gas. Is Alabama self-serve? It's self-serve? When I moved to Georgia, I moved from New Jersey, which is not self-serve. And the first gas station we stopped at, we stopped there, we waited for 5 minutes. We're like, they have such long wait times here. We've been sitting here, nobody's coming to pump our gas. So, but they have to have the pumps, they have to have the store, they have to have all of that. And those are all the vehicles they use to deliver the gas, right? In the same way, medical care is there, but the vehicle that we use to deliver it is business systems. So medicine is not a business, but it is a business. You need business skills for that. So let's look at where we are now. For the first time in 2016, physician ownership stakes dropped to less than 50%, which means we had more hospitals, investors, that kind, owning the businesses in medicine as opposed to the physician. And what makes it even scarier is when you break it down, it was really about 50% for the physicians 55 and older, but for the younger ones under the age of 40, it was 27.9. So not only is the number lower, but the younger the doctor, the less likely they want to have anything to do with owning a practice. And then we went down to the medical students, and only 22% of them even anticipated one day owning a stake in a practice. So not just owning a practice, even being a partner, like, don't want to deal with it, okay? But now if you look, there's actually data that shows the difference in outcomes between the physician-run organizations and those that are not run by physicians. So here you have physician-run hospitals topped the ranking and earned 25% higher quality scores, which would make you happy, than non-physician-run hospitals, according to a study. And we're talking hospitals like Mayo Clinic, Mass General, Cleveland, all physician-run hospitals. So the higher up they are, the better the quality scores are. And for the smaller practices, you'll see practices with 1 to 2 physicians had 33% fewer preventable hospital admissions than practices with 10 to 19 physicians. So if you run a small practice like I do, it's something that's really beneficial, and probably you should take advantage of everything Joni talked about, because the tendency is that you have better outcomes. And practices with 3 to 9 physicians had 27% fewer admissions. So the issue that physicians are facing is this. These are the top 3 reasons why physicians leave private practice, and I didn't really realize it till about 3 years ago, the number of practices that would close on a yearly basis, and it's not because of clinical care. It's because of the problem of running the business systems, cash flow kind of problems. So the first thing is, and this is from a survey, the overhead and cost of maintaining a medical practice is too high. It says 33%. But most of the well-run pediatric practices actually run about 50%, 50, 60%. So that's even a low number, but significant enough to make them leave. A desire to focus on the practice of medicine and patient care rather than administrative hassle. So for the most part, our desire is, I just want to take care of the patient. I don't even want to bother with charting. I don't want to bother with coding. I don't want to bother with figuring out reimbursement. I just want to take care of patients, which used to work back in the day, just doesn't work as well now. And the third is reimbursement cuts. And sometimes what that is just not taking advantage of other things that are out there. So the problem is this: as a group, we lack interest in the business of medicine. We want to take care of our patients. And most physicians have no business training. I don't know about you, but in medical school, I had no business training. In residency, I had no business training whatsoever. And private practice is a complex business. It's not, even the reimbursement models, it's more complex than just a cash transaction. So that's what the issue is. So I want to stop here and kind of have everybody take a look back. 2 months ago, I landed at the airport in Texas. And when I got there, the first thing I did was I pulled out my phone, I pulled up my Uber app, and got a car to take me to my hotel. When I sat in the car, it dawned on me that in the last 2 or 3 years, I had not entered a taxi, not once. There had been a transition, and Uber had kind of knocked them out. They kind of still exist, but there are lots of families who this was their business and it doesn't exist anymore. There are people who used to be taxi drivers or used to own those companies, and they can't really make as much of an income because Uber came in here and created a big disruption. And it is not as obvious for the healthcare industry, but we are in the middle of a big disruption. And we have to adapt so we don't become statistics. If you think about it, Amazon has done the same thing to the brick and mortar retail stores, where you even have the giants like Macy's and Payless and Rooms To Go and the rest of them closing tons of stores or closing completely because Amazon came and they didn't adapt to it, right? I used to love Blockbuster, kind of, sort of, but Netflix came, they didn't adapt, and they disappeared. So it doesn't mean we have to change completely, but we do need to adapt. We do need to adjust. And I believe for the times that we're in, one of the things we have to do is start acquiring business skills so we can stay ahead of the curve, so we can compete, because we do have to. Okay, it's test time. Nobody's excited? All right, so the percentage of medical students that anticipate owning their own practice? B, excellent. And these are all the ways to acquire business skills, except business of medicine conferences like this amazing one, books, and taking longer calls. See, I recommend no long calls. And the top reason why physicians leave private practice is the overhead and cost of maintaining a medical practice is too high, the patients are demanding and leave bad reviews, and the hours are too long. A, excellent. They're straight A students, everybody here. All right, so I want us to spend a moment, I think I've played enough on what the issues are, and I want us to spend a moment looking at the solution. So the first thing we need to do, we need to embrace entrepreneurship. We need to get a business education. It may seem like running a business is a daunting task, starting a business, having to figure out social media and speak your business and all of that. It may seem complicated, but I want you to take a moment and think of what you do for a living, okay? You do spinal taps for fun, right? That's how good you are at it. It's so much more complicated than social media, trust me, right? We've learned to do the impossible. We've learned to work really long hours. We've learned to do all of those things. A business education is something that we can get. We have the skills, we have the work ethic, we can do it. All right, so in the beginning, it may seem weird. Same way the first time you did a spinal tap, it was probably a little nerve-wracking, right? But you do enough of them, it becomes second nature. So as physicians, business can become second nature, right? So we have the great clinical care, we have the business services, the business skills, and we can do what we need to do for our patients. So when I talk about business education, I talk about things like books. Now, we're all great readers, but the question becomes, when is the last time you read a business book, right? An area of business where you're like, I haven't been able to figure this out. If you are like I used to be, when you see profit and loss statements, you just glaze over and want to pass out. Those are all things that can be learned. Marketing can be learned. Speaking can be learned. All those things are learnable skills. So, and it doesn't have to be complicated. You could choose to read a book a month. In the area of business. And there are lots of highly recommended books. I'll be happy to talk to you about that, but just pick something, okay? The second thing is podcasts. Now, one of the things that I learned to do is I learned to turn my car into a school. So I call it Automobile University. And in Georgia, we do long trips. Maybe it's the same in Alabama, where I would drive 25 minutes to work. The thing is, if you spend the time you drive to work listening to a business podcast and you do that consistently, you can get up to 10 hours a month, 120 hours a year. And if you would listen to business podcasts for 120 hours a year, at the end of that year, you'll be a much more savvy business savvy physician. Okay, so it doesn't take a whole lot. It just takes hitting a play button once you get into your car. It's not extra downtime. If you're a girl that it takes you a while to get dressed in the morning, then play that while you're getting dressed in the morning. But expose yourself to that. It's all about immersion. You learn the language of business. You hear ideas. And a lot of times, innovation in business really comes from taking something from one industry and translating it to another. These are not all business of medicine podcasts. This could also be business people that have nothing to do with medicine, but you learn a lot that way. The third thing is courses. How many of you own practices? Excellent, okay. So there are courses for physicians on anything. Like if you need to learn how to work social media, because social media, the times we're in, is really important, especially if you have a kind of medical practice like you're a dermatologist or a plastic surgeon or a weight loss doctor, or primary care where you can show before and afters, not necessarily pictures, but with stories. Those are so powerful. I have a friend who's a weight loss doctor who had her patients lose 40 pounds, and she went on and did a really nice testimonial on there. She got 40 patients in 10 days from that one post. Right? I think that's pretty good marketing, but there are courses on all of these things so we can learn them. Conferences like this one, nothing as powerful as being in a room where you have really great information going out, and you're also in a room with other people that you can learn from, that you can network with. I was watching, there's a lot of powerful connections and ideas and all of that going off, which if you're just sitting in your practice or sitting at your job, you're not necessarily picking up on that. And they don't all have to be CME. Some of them can be just business conferences, and that's fine. You can do an MBA, but if you notice, you have 5 things you can do. So don't let that stop you, because there's a timeline to that. Don't let that stop you. You can start doing all of the other ones today, okay? The idea behind this is immersion. So the easiest way to learn Spanish is not Rosetta Stone, and Rosetta Stone is great, but that's not the easiest way. The easiest way is for someone to dump you in Spain and leave you there for 3 or 4 months. you'll figure out stuff in a hot second, right? In the same way, you want to be around the information, around the people who are in business, around people telling their stories. You want to listen to entrepreneurs, what they did in their startup, what they had to do to get the right staff. I'm sure if you're here and you own a practice, HR is like one of your absolute nightmares, right? Hiring people, keeping them, building a company culture. Listen to how other people have done these things. People like Chick-fil-A who have done an amazing job of acquiring talent, how they turned 18-year-olds into wonderful people who smile and pleasure all day. I don't know how they do that, but they have podcasts about it. They have books about it, and you can learn it and then you can apply it as well. So the idea here is total immersion. The second thing is to build a network. And again, we've done this in our training as doctors, in med school, in residency. We didn't learn in isolation, right? We learned in community. So you definitely want to have mentors. You want to have people that you can sit with and quote unquote talk shop, right? And say, these are the challenges that I'm facing. This is what I'm trying to do. And this will be someone who is further ahead in their entrepreneurial journey, and they can give you ideas. They can help you learn from their mistakes so you don't have to make their mistakes. People say there's no shortcut to success, but the truth of the matter is there is, and it's your mentors, because they will tell you the mistakes you don't have to make. So things that will cost you 2 years to figure out, you can discover it one day over lunch. So you want to have mentors. I recommend, if you are going to embrace entrepreneurship, especially if you are going to take on loans, you're trying to start up a practice, you're trying to start up a new non-clinical business, I do recommend coaches because for the most part, we don't have a lot of business education. Again, this will be one of your shortcuts to success. As a resident, you had your attendings and all of that, but you also had the residents that were ahead of you that literally dragged you and helped you learn the new thing and held you accountable. I don't know about you, but the first time I had to do a urine cath, I wasn't excited about it. The first time I had to do a spinal tap, I wasn't excited about it. The first time I had to do a central line in a 2-pound preemie baby, I wasn't excited about it. But I didn't have an option because I had people who held me accountable, and they're like, you're gonna do that. And then I did it long enough to where it was second nature, and I was no longer afraid of it. This is what mentors and coaches will do for you. And colleagues. Now, when I say colleagues, what I mean is like people in this room. So there are people who are trying to build businesses as well. So they're probably at your stage, but they're also in the grind, if you will. So that way, when the practice thing is working, I want to quit, they're like, what's wrong with you? I felt like that last week, stop it. Let's go have lunch and we'll continue from where we stopped. So you want to have people in your tribe who are like you, because I think entrepreneurship can be lonely and it's weird, so you want to have fellow weird people. And there are a lot of physician entrepreneur groups. If you are a social media person, there are a lot of these groups on Facebook, so you can connect with people literally all over the nation. You can go on there and ask questions. You can go on there and vent. You can go on there and get ideas. But social media, there are two sides to it. There's a part where it's just for fun, and you go and watch funny cat videos, but you can also use it to your advantage, right? So this would be one of to your advantage, because there are lots of people who cannot all be in this room, but they're all connecting in places in social media. So there are groups like that. You can be part of those groups. You can be part of, physical groups where you meet face to face. Now, the third thing is probably the biggest thing, and that is that you have to take action. You have to take action. The reason why I put this here is because it's in medical school and residency, we're trained for perfection, right? And we don't want a B+ neurosurgeon, right? You want an A+ neurosurgeon. When it comes to business, the goal is not perfection as much as it is progress. Like, I haven't done any social media, I haven't done any speaking. So I'm gonna embrace it, I'm gonna learn what I can learn about it, I'm gonna go do it. It's not gonna be perfect, but it's going to be better than where I am now. And then once you've done the first one, you're like, I'm going to do the second one. It's going to be even better. So a B+ is acceptable for business. Not for medicine, but for business it is. So it's taking action. Because as physicians, I think analysis paralysis is our thing. We want everything to be perfect, and which is the way it should be. It just hurts us when it's in business. So I do a lot of videos, YouTube, the whole 9 yards. And I knew 2 years before I did my first video that I was supposed to do videos. But I was like, what do you mean video? Like my face on the World Wide Web with me talking? Like, I'm not gonna do that. I don't know how to do that. I'm not a speaker. I'm not gonna do it. And I kept procrastinating and procrastinating. And then one day it dawned on me that I had been doing this for 2 years, 2 whole years. I was like, if I started messy as it would have been and scared and all of that, I think in 2 years I would have been an expert, kind of. So that day what I did was right there where I had that aha moment, I called my daughter, who was 9 years old at the time. I called her, I was like, hold this phone, press play there. I sat there, recorded my first video, uploaded it to the World Wide Web. I was like, now what's the worst that can happen? I've done the worst video I'll ever do, and it can just get better from there. So I say that to say, take action. Just do it, Nike style. Just do something, anything, but take action. So if you own a business and you know like, oh, I know speaking is one of the fastest ways to grow my business, then start speaking. I know I need to do social media, start doing that. Maybe you've never asked a patient for a review, and patients are looking at these things. Ask for the review. Maybe for 3 years you've been planning to open your practice and you've put the money away and you've talked to some people who will come on board, but you just haven't triggered it. Trigger it. Take action. Nothing is going to happen, no matter how much you learn, no matter how much you network, nothing is going to happen till you take action. That's where the rubber meets the road. So the question becomes, now what? So are you going to be like this guy who loves medicine, loves helping people, but because he hasn't been able to figure out business systems and the administration, he's frustrated by his job. He's frustrated that he doesn't have enough time off. He's frustrated that he can't give his passions true expression. Because like most physicians, I'm sure there's some subsect of patients that you want to help. For instance, the first picture I showed you of me with my patients, obesity is one of the things that we are working on in my practice. I want to be able to go take walks with them. I want to be able to help them, have them come back and say, look at their BMI and it's in the normal range for the first time in 3 years. But until we figure out how to build thriving businesses, we end up looking like him. So based on the data, our patients are depending on us to rise. They're depending on us to embrace that role. They're depending on us to not just look at patient care in isolation, to also embrace the business side and the administrative side, because when we do that, the outcomes are better. When we run practices, the outcomes are better. They're depending on us. On the other hand, we owe it to ourselves to rise. There's so much to be done. There's so much to be accomplished. There's so much benefit we can give our patients. But for us to do that, we need to be able to create practices where we can help them and effect those changes. Thank you.